Hi guys, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for everyone that's on joining us from the cameras here where we're live streaming. And I just wanted to welcome and thank you all for coming. First off is some housekeeping. Restroom location, no intermission. Snacks are available. They're in the back there. Please help yourself. Sign-in sheets are in the front. I think most of you signed in. If you haven't, please do so after the meeting. And you may ask for more information on this topic or any of the sponsoring organizations. Follow-up information will be forwarded to your email in the next few days, including a recording of this event and all of the slides shared tonight. Please hold your questions during the presentations. The presenters will all be available at tables around the room outside of the presentations, so you can follow up with them face-to-face and ask your questions. If you need a note card and pen to write your questions down, if you prefer, I can bring those for you. Those are available. Again, this session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube via MEIC in the near future. Please share the information with anyone who was unable to attend this event. And we thank you for being here. I'm Kassi Solberg. I'm a homesteading mother of 6, born in Montana and raised in North Idaho. I recently moved back to Montana and settled in Broadview for what was to be a simple, quiet life. 44 days later, I found out about the AI data center. I've been advocating for the community ever since. Currently, with my team of volunteers, we've written a Yellowstone County ballot initiative. It's currently in review with the county attorney, and he can have it for up to 21 days. Once the petition has the green light from the attorney, volunteers will have until August 12th to collect 20,000 registered voters' signatures in Yellowstone County in order to put it on the ballot this November. To learn more or get involved, I have a sign-up sheet in the back, as well as the press release on this. No matter which way you're leaning, let's put it to a vote. We're here tonight to learn more about Quantica's plan for a hyperscale data center in Broadview, including what would be one of the largest gas plants in the U.S. Currently, there is essentially no oversight or zoning regulations relative to data centers. Our panelists will shed some light on why regulations and community oversight are critical. The stakes are high. Each of our panelists will give about a 10-minute presentation and then be available for questions after the entire panel has presented. Our panelists are Hedges, the Montana Environmental Information Center, Dr. Byron, a Billings pediatrician of 4 decades and chair of Montana Health and Climate, Steve Krum, a retired refinery operation zone supervisor and resident of Laurel, where the YCGS gas plant was built. Felder, owner-operator of a vineyard and winery, now neighboring the YCG's gas plant. Jim Doherty, former county commissioner of Morrow County, Oregon, where Amazon built 10 data centers. Cari, Olson, Broadview resident, concerned mother, and political organizer at Just One Montanans. Thank you all for being here. Hedges, Montana Environmental Information Center. Hedges is Executive Director of the Montana Environmental Information Center, where she has worked for 32 years. MEIC is dedicated to protecting and restoring Montana's land, air, and water through advocacy, education, litigation, legislation, and the empowerment of the public. Anne's work currently focuses on energy policy and affordability and the threats that data centers pose to both. She received her bachelor's in science in environmental policy analysis and planning from the University of California at Davis and a Master of Environmental Law and Policy from Vermont Law School. She resides in Helena. Welcome, Anne Hedges.
Thank you, everybody. It's really nice to be back. I don't know how many people were here when we were here a few months ago. Great. Thank you. I have decided that I'm not going to go through the same presentation that I gave. I'm going to assume that everybody has enough knowledge now to understand what a data center is. We're not going to go into the whole, problems with AI. We're just here to talk about data centers and the problems they are creating on the energy system and the problems they are causing for communities all over the country. We are not unique. The only thing unique about the United States is how many data centers exist here compared to every place else. This is where data centers are being built worldwide. We have more than any other country by a huge amount. I'm happy to show that slide later, but I won't do it in this presentation. But that means that we have a lot of experience in this country with what is going on with data centers. And the problem is a lot of communities are finding that these things are popping up and they have no say in it. And that's exactly the problem. Is when communities are left out of the decision making, when communities are left out of knowing what is going on, when there is no transparency. We all wonder, we have questions. We want to know what the impact would be to our taxes, to our energy bills, to our communities, to our noise, to our peace of mind. Nobody lives in rural Montana because they love bright lights and loud noises. Nobody. So what we would like to do is try to find a way to deal with this. There are some places where there should not be AI data centers, period. There are other places where they probably can go, but they need to be reviewed rigorously. We need to consider what the impacts are, and we need to make sure we mitigate those impacts. Because the bottom line is if we require the richest men in America to mitigate the impacts so our lives are still pleasant living in our current locations, then they will do it. These guys have the money to spend, but they won't spend it unless they have to. So what we need to do is make the rules that say, this is how you are going to come into our state. I'm super happy that Quantica has some kind of agreement with the unions, because every shop in this state that is a data center, considering that the amazing amount of electrical needs they have, they need really top-notch electricians and plumbers to make sure these things stay safe. So that's a very good step in the right direction for Quantica. But there's way more right now in the negative column for Quantica, and it all has to do with transparency. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So let's just start here. Last time I was here, I brought a slide that we got from somebody who flies to show this area. This time we have actually labeled the area. So you can see this is looking south. So you have Broadview in the bottom right-hand corner, and then you have, see that kind of funny E shape there? That appears to be Quantica's land. If it's not theirs, I sure would like them to tell us, but it sure appears that that is the land that Quantica owns. And in the middle of that is that substation that I think anybody in Broadview is familiar with. So, or not the substation, right. And then there's a residence that lives, a couple residences that live just on near the E, which is really unfortunate for those folks because of what we're going to hear. So next slide. I wanted to just give you a different perspective. This is looking north. So you can see how big this area is, 5,100 acres. That is a very large area. What happens when you cover a lot of that in impermeable surfaces? What's happened in other places is you can get flooding when you have a big runoff event, a big rain event. We all know that we have some gully washers in June, particularly. And so we just want to make sure that we have really good regulation, making sure that when we do have a gully washer, all that impermeable surface doesn't cause flooding for anybody who's in the area. Next slide. So let's just talk for just a millisecond about Northwestern Energy and their electricity bills. And it's really important because what's happening all over the country is these data centers are causing communities' electricity bills to increase dramatically, especially on the East Coast where they have a whole lot of data centers. These data centers have the potential to help us lower bills, but what we've been seeing all over the country is they are raising our bills. And so I want to just set the stage because right now Northwestern Energy, the biggest utility in the state, its electricity rates, since we re-regulated back in about 2009, its electricity rates have increased 99%. If you feel like your electric bills have gone up, that's because they have. And since the middle of 2022, they have increased 44%. And that will be as of July 1st this year. These are current numbers. 44% is greater than the rate of inflation. People simply can't afford it. This is contributing to the affordability crisis, not just in Montana, but all over the country. We are definitely seeing this happen all over the country. Next slide. So what is Quantica's proposal? Well, it's fuzzy at best, and that's part of the problem because Quantica is just they're getting the permits, they're going to build the building. But they are not the ones who are going to have the computers that come into those buildings. That's usually somebody who leases it. And so Quantica doesn't want to tell you what the answers are. No data center does. There's a huge lack of transparency all over the country because they're trying to entice somebody to come in and use their facility. So what we need to do is insist on transparency. But what we know right now is what we got, actually, Alex Mitchell, an investigative reporter in Montana, got from DEQ. There are all these emails from DEQ about this proposal. And what we learned through those emails is DEQ saying, Quantica does not yet have a solid grasp of their potential water use and discharge needs to support the proposed project. And that's a big deal. It would be really nice if they had some sense of how much water they need, what their waste was going to be, how much volume they'd have, where that was going to go. Were they planning on using your municipal wastewater system here, like some facilities do, and other places in the country, and overwhelm your system? You know, I saw in the paper they intend to help pay for your wastewater treatment system. That's great, but what are the strings that are attached to that? Those are the answers that people need to know. And we know they're planning a gas line for this facility. We know they're planning the gas line because what we learned in their conversations with DEQ, and this is all from the emails, is they are proposing 585 megawatts of, they always throw in base load, whether it is or not, doesn't matter, of power generated by gas-fired engines, 20 megawatt engines, and 1.2 gigawatts, that's 1,200 megawatts, of power from gas-fired turbines. Turbines often use more water than your single-cycle facilities. So keep that in mind. On-site power generation will be supported by minimal grid power requirements. We're going to get to that in a second. And they're in discussions with Northwestern. And then they plan to come online soon. Next slide. In 2025. So Quantica, at the same time, on March 6th, filed 21 applications with Northwestern Energy to try to get energy onto the grid and pull energy off the grid, called an interconnect. It filed 21 applications for a total of 8,835 megawatts of interconnection. Now, that seems like a big number, but nobody has any idea what that means unless you're in the energy world. So the next slide is going to show you how big 8,800 megawatts is. So you can see on the on the right, that is Northwestern's customers, all of their customers' demand. Their statewide average total demand is 760 megawatts. Okay? Then you have the Sadie Data Center in Butte, 250 megawatts. Then you have the Atlas, 150. You have the Krum one that's causing a huge stir outside of Missoula. It's 7 megawatts. They're very concerned and they have a great process to try to review it. Quantica is on the far right. Quantica dwarfs everything else. It's more power than this entire state uses. You're going to have really big energy facilities here, and you're going to have 1,700 megawatts worth of gas. What is 1,700 megawatts worth of gas? That's bigger than Colstrip. It's bigger than all the gas plants in the state combined right now. 1,700 megawatts of gas is enormous, and it's going to be varying types of gas. Next slide. So we don't know. There's no transparency. We don't know what actual technology they intend to use, but this is just a quick overview of the types of gas plants that they could be choosing. And should they choose those, what your emissions in metric tons would be for sulfur dioxide, first column, nitrogen oxides, next column, CO2, and then fine particulate, which can lodge deep into the lung and cause all sorts of respiratory diseases and ailments. And as Northwestern said in its recent integrated resource plan, the water demand increases as you go down this chart. What you have at the top of the chart are your peakers, your plants that come on and on really fast, and what you have at the bottom of the chart are your combined cycle facilities that really are more efficient. They're just more efficient. You can see their emissions are lower, but they use more water. 1 minute left. Next slide. So, noise. A lot of communities, you consistently hear this, their biggest complaint is noise. They try to sleep at night, and there's this hum, and they take these recordings inside their homes, and they're loud. So what you have is these data centers that have machines whirring, they have fans, they have cooling systems, there's about 6 different ways you're going to get a lot of noise coming out of these data centers. And these data centers can be anywhere from 60 to 110. I saw one thing today for 170 decibels. And that's a logarithmic scale. So 80 decibels is, it's 100 times louder to have between 80 and 100 decibels. It's logarithmic. It is not linear. So as you go up, you're getting a lot louder in each small increment. So let's go to the next slide. And so Quantica's response, don't worry about it. If you don't like it, move north. That's what they said in the New York Times, and not data center up north. People who've been here for generations can move north to the next county. That's callous. That is disrespectful. And the bottom line is there are ways to mitigate these impacts. What we want to know is what the impacts are going to be and how they're going to mitigate them, and we want to make sure those mitigations are in writing and enforceable by the county, by the Public Service Commission, by the people who live in this community. So these are the I'm done. So let's go to the next slide. I just want to remind you what we know at the Public Service Commission right now, and that's it. Those are the agreements. Just don't forget, that's the agreement that is between Northwestern and these data centers. Next slide. So transparency is a big deal. But I just want one last thing. Missoula County is the only county in the state who has developed regulations to protect the community from data centers. They're going through that process. It's a permitting process for the data center. They consider noise, they consider vibration, they consider lighting, and they can deny the permit if Krum does not give them the information that is required in the permitting process. And they can tell Krum they need to lower their noise level because they're too loud. No other county in this state has this ability. Every county should be able to do this. Every single county should have a permitting system for data centers that does allow them to do what Missoula is doing. Missoula didn't create these by chance. Missoula created them because of a cryptocurrency operation in Bonner. Years ago, people could not sleep at night. It was so loud. They couldn't have their windows open because the crypto operation was so loud. So Missoula developed these regulations for that crypto operation, and boy, are they happy they have them now because they're using them for the data center. So there's a whole host of ways to mitigate the harm. Communities can do this, and we should be allowing them to do it. We're going to need some legislation next session that gives every community the right to have a permitting system that requires these data centers to do what the community wants. You were here first, and it always seems fair. I think that's my last slide. Last slide? That's it. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer questions afterwards.
Thank you, Anne. Dr. Lori Byron. Dr. Lori Byron is a pediatrician who has practiced in Montana for almost 4 decades. She organizes pediatricians across the country for climate action and chairs the nonprofit Montana Health and Climate. Welcome.
Being here. 5 years ago, a group of Montana scientists and doctors completed a section of the Montana Climate Assessment called the Climate Change and Human Health Report. Next slide, please. In that document, wildfire smoke, drought, and rising temperatures were the climate change issues that we were seeing and that science indicated we were going to continue to see in Montana. At that time, we weren't even thinking about data centers. Next slide, please. Data centers can look sort of clean if you like huge industrial complexes, and especially if you just see a schematic. Next slide. It looks a little less pretty when it's in real person. We don't see smokestacks here with billowing pollution, but if they provide their own electricity on site with methane power plants, next slide, as has been proposed by Quantica for here, their own electricity, whether or not they produce it here within sight of where we are right now, or somewhere else in Montana, is going to amount, like Anne said, to more power plant structure than what we have in the entire state of Montana. And these power plants, even though they're proposed to be run on methane and not coal, they'll actually probably pollute the air more than coal strip number 4, which has the highest rate of emission of pollution in the entire country of all coal burning plants. But because this is so vast here that even though it's methane, it's going to likely do just as much damage. So the worst case scenario, like you saw on Anne's slide with the red and yellow and blue, indicates that we can have 100 metric tons of sulfur dioxide every year. Sulfur dioxide has been known for many, many decades for its toxicity. It affects our lungs and our hearts and our neurologic system, and even increases type 2 diabetes. 1,000 metric tons of nitrous oxide, nitrogen oxides. And that increases what's called all-cause mortality. And that basically means whatever people die from in the area where you live, more people are going to die from all those things. I was a mathematician before I became a doctor, and I love numbers and statistics. But as a pediatrician, I don't think about numbers. I think about humans. As a pediatrician, next slide, we see air pollution in the delivery room with more preterm babies, some of whom will have permanent disabilities because of being born preterm. We see it in the emergency room with kids having asthma attacks, disrupting their family life, their schooling, their outdoor activities. And I see it in annual physicals for teens who so often tell us of the despair that they feel about their future because of climate change and environmental damage. And my doctor colleagues that care for grown-ups see even more ailments than I see as a pediatrician. Next slide. We now know through a vast body of medical literature, tens and thousands of research articles about the harms caused by those tiny air pollution particles that we call particulate matter. Whenever we burn anything like coal or gas, those tiny particles are released. We breathe them in. It goes through our lungs and into our bloodstream. And from there, it goes to our brains, which are not protected by the blood-brain barrier like we thought back when I was in medical school. And they go to our fetuses, who are not protected by the placenta. We also once thought the placenta protected babies from everything. So air pollution is linked to the patients that I see. Kids with learning disabilities, preterm births, and even infant deaths. While my doctor colleagues that care for grown-ups I see even more diseases linked to air pollution, like heart attacks and strokes, dementia, cancer, and immune malfunctions. Next slide. To change the topic a little bit, here in eastern Montana, we're affected by drought cycles and irrigation demands. We suffered a D4 drought in the past decade in eastern Montana, the worst stage of drought and the only time in recorded history that we've had that severe of a level of drought in eastern Montana. And the level of potential water use by this data center is vast, absolutely vast. And yet Quantica says, and I quote, they do not yet have a solid grasp of the potential water use. We need to protect our farm and ranch families, and be assured that water use and contamination has been reflected accurately. How can any project possibly be approved before we know what's being proposed? Next slide. You all have a few blessings here in Broadview. Next slide. Over half of Americans live in places where noise levels are significant enough to cause health problems, but not you here in Broadview. But besides hearing loss, noise pollution is linked to sleep disturbance, to difficulty learning, to high blood pressure, and heart failure. Noise can lead to broken heart syndrome, an acute type of heart failure related to chronic stress on our bodies that can occur from chronic noise. And chronic noise leads to more depression and anxiety, which in turn increases drug and alcohol abuse. Next slide. Most Americans live in areas affected by outdoor, nighttime light pollution, but not here in Broadview. Next slide. But light pollution disrupts our natural cycles, our circadian rhythms. Light at night can affect the function of our genes. So far, they've mostly researched indoor light pollution, but the early studies looking at outdoor nighttime light pollution are indicating that breast cancer and other diseases are increased just like it is when you're exposed to indoor nighttime light pollution. Next slide. A major problem we face in Montana, since this process of building large data centers as fast as possible is occurring, is that we have no safeguards. And Northwest and Quantica and some of our elected officials are not being transparent. We don't know what their water usage is going to be, what their source of electricity is going to be, and we don't know if they're going to contract out and use out-of-state workers instead of local people. It might come as a surprise to many of you, but healthcare folk really care about the economy and jobs, because jobs with a livable wage is one of the most important determiners of good health for a family. We can't be healthy when we can't afford decent food or a decent place to live. But data centers produce 100 times fewer jobs than any other type of economic development when you rank them based on the amount of energy that they use. Next slide. Most of us in this room would gladly sacrifice ourselves for our kids, but you in Broadview are potentially becoming a sacrifice zone for AI, for tech companies, and for their unimaginable wealth. No one is even asking you if you're willing. The health of your family might be sacrificed for what's being labeled as progress. People are making decisions, and at this point, it's people outside of this room. Next slide. But the people within this room and within our region, we have the power to protect our health, protect our unborn babies, and protect the beauty of our high plains. So let's do it together with Kassi and MEIC. Thank you.
Steve Krum. We would like to introduce Steve Krum and his wife have been married for 51 years and have built a life together centered around their 3 children and 6 grandchildren. Congratulations. Nearly 44 years ago, they moved to the country and have enjoyed hobby farming ever since. Steve spent almost 15 years working on the railroad as a carman and temporary supervisor before beginning a 28-year career at a local refinery. He started as an operator and later moved into management, retiring as an operations zone supervisor after serving in leadership roles for the final 15 years of his career. Retired for the past 7 years, Steve and his wife continue to enjoy their hobby farm. Caring for their horses, puppies, and kitties, raising hay and appreciating rural life and local wildlife. Since October 2021, Steve has been actively involved in opposing the Northwest Energy power plant in Laurel, believing it threatens the health and well-being of his family, friends, and the community. He maintains that the plant does not belong in Morrow or anywhere really. Gives concerns about climate change. In Steve's opinion, this plant in Broadview should never be built as designed, he says. We can do better, and we should do better in Broadview. Thank you. Please welcome Steve.
As you heard, I tend to babble a lot, so I wrote a lot. And basically, One thing I want to say, one thing I want to say is through the fight against this plant, which,
Even really close to your mouth.
There.
Ms. Byron just spoke about. We were at the state legislature fighting this plant, and one of the people promoting the power plant in Laurel stood up and clearly stated, let's face it, somebody's got to be sacrificed. And I hate to say this, but it looks like they're looking at you guys now, because they sacrificed our neighborhood, my daughter's neighborhood, and that's why I'm here, and it's wrong. They should not be doing this stuff. So I'll read what I have written and go from there. Living near the natural gas power plant in Morrow has shaped my day-to-day life in ways that are hard to ignore. But should be a place of comfort and stability has instead become a source of ongoing concern for our health, the environment, our family, our community, and our state. From the constant presence of industrial noise to worries about air quality, the plant is never really out of sight or out of mind. Even when it isn't visible, it's something I think about regularly, especially when considering long-term health and impacts for our daughter and our son-in-law, friends, and neighbors who are constantly impacted by this plant. There's a persistent sense that we are being forced to accept risks we didn't choose. We had a Montana Code annotated, county regulations, City of Laurel ordinances, resolutions all stating that the rights of existing landowners must be protected. And what happened? All of these rights were shrugged off by the county commissioners, the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, other state officials, the Laurel attorney, as if there would never be an impact. But the impact was documented at the beginning, but ignored, and today this residential neighborhood and the community around the plant are living with obvious noise and unseen hazardous chemical and poisonous particulate matter constantly raining down on everyone and everything around the plant. It sickens my stomach every time I think about or drive by this plant. Beyond the physical impact, there's also an emotional impact. Some in the neighborhood continue to address these issues and to raise concerns, meeting with plant reps and filing regular complaints to express our concerns because we believe our voices deserve to be heard. This effort at times gives us some hope, but has also shown how difficult it can be to push back against a large corporation project once it has been built. I believe we as neighbors all need to open our eyes and ears to the problems we will face at this AI plant, which is going to be enormous, and start being there for each other. If we stand together from the start, show up in large numbers, showing our opposition, we have a better chance. I believe we have a better chance of success in stopping corporations from imposing their greed and grab for power at the expense of each of our personal property rights. These experiences have made it clear that decisions about energy and development are not abstract. They directly affect real people, real neighbors, real lives. Living here has motivated me to stay informed, get involved, continue to advocate for healthier, more sustainable choices for our community. I believe we need to ask lots of questions and start digging for answers early, because if we wait for the company or the state to fill us in, the deal will be done and the door to any change will be all but closed, making it almost impossible for us to change or stop what is being planned. We are always the last to hear about what they are going to do. Here are some questions and comments I would recommend asking, which I have quite a few of them, so I probably won't have time to get through them all. One of the things is, just for your awareness, prevailing winds, noise and air pollution travel with the wind. But with the current climate, the wind direction is constantly changing where we live. So in Broadview, I'm not sure how the wind historically flows here. You see a constant change or not. Natural gas is methane gas. The industry came up with natural because it sounds safer, but it is still full of poisons, full of air pollutants, and the process of burning it and generating this energy creates other particulate matter that, like Ann said, you will be breathing when the wind's blowing your way. One question, why does it have to be so close to Broadview? The wind farm by the Fire Mountains that they built, that's 400 megawatts. It's way out there by one farmhouse out there. And it's not noisy, it's clean, and it makes 400 megawatts. The highway continues for miles past the railroad tracks, so why do they have to build right by the railroad tracks? It's gotta be loaded on a truck, and it's gotta be moved to wherever they're gonna put it, but it doesn't need to be right there by the railroad tracks. It could be anywhere out there, farther away from the community. So I'm sharing my time with my son-in-law, who lives directly next to the plant, and it is majorly affecting our family. And so, it's his turn, so I will step down and Aaron can come up. You guys, and I'll pass them on.
We can also send them in the email and follow up if anybody signs in. You can share Steve's questions and comments.
I just think it's really important, Aaron. Aaron Felder. Aaron Felder is first and foremost a husband and a father. Professionally, he has worked as a crane operator for many years, often traveling in and out of the state to support his family. He and his wife own and operate a small vineyard and winery that they have invested countless hours of hard work, dedication, and personal sacrifice to build. The Yellowstone generator station was built approximately 2,300 feet from the Felder home. The station's proximity has significantly affected their quality of life and their ability to operate a vineyard and winery in a peaceful environment they work so hard to create. The impacts from both noise and air pollution are constant. Unlike a temporary inconvenience, these impacts follow them every day because their home, family, and business are located there. Thank you. Welcome, Aaron.
Hello guys, I'm not the best public speaker, but I'm going to try to make it through this. I do have some data with me too, so later on this evening, if you'd like to just see some real sound data and some gas data and some things there, trying to get some heads and tails out of it for you. It'll be really good. So, like I said, not the best public speaker, but make the best out of it here. So we'll get to, this is the slide. This is the guys. Okay. So, did we skip one there? Okay. Yeah, staying up to generator stations and data centers. So, yeah, power and people, right? Your power and numbers, right, to Yellowstone County. We've been to the county prior to the three other commissions that are there right now. And I want to say I was there 4 weeks ago. And so don't let some of our frustrations pass them with the other three county commissioners. What I'm getting to is they're willing to listen. So go and speak to them and talk to them. I will say when you do go and speak and talk to them, yes, we all have complaints or things to address, but try to give them something to go off of that's factual. That way they can do some research and look at some things. So, one thing I added on here, the EPA has an updated regulation on sound for 4 decades. That's true. And so what's going on, and go to the next slide, but what's going on with that? So 1974, they stopped doing some studies or something to that equation, and they said, we're just gonna have the A standard sound. And so that really tremendously affects us, because just like Northwest Energy stood in the room and said, hey, a simple conversation is 65 decibels. Well, it does, but that's not what's going on. What happens is it's the low frequencies that are getting us. And that's on the L side of the L wave of sound. So the EPA has recognized that there are some things there that can affect people, and so they need to update and do some better things. That's on a federal level, right? So throughout the process that's going on, those are good things to notify your senators and people in that area. Yes, EPA is getting sued by some entities, asking them to have to sue them to ask them to do a better job. It's kind of silly that that's the case, to do due diligence to the people in this United States, we the people, but they have to get sued to try to get something out of them. Something about the sound as well with the EPA, we've kind of learned here. And it's right on their website that your basis points. So if you're on an A spectrum, if your basis points goes up 3 points, that's double the sound. But to the human ear, it says on there that it's 10 basis points. This is all A. The L weight is a much more defined sound. So what we have going on there, we go to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, so what's going on with the weights, and then I'll get to this. What's going on with the weight of the sound is it's in hertz. And I can show you on my computer when I feel like to see. And you can look up, goes right back to the value of the doctor here, the value of 31.5 hertz, 20 hertz, 16 hertz, 25 hertz. When those are in an A value of, let's say, 48, 52, it's drama. It's an impact, like if I just popped you right in the chest. It's an impact in your ear, like somebody grabbing that little bone in your ear, rattling your ear. It's annoying. It's terrible. It'll run you out of your house. So, organizing. So some of the things when I was looking up for this, I started doing some research, and some things were already talked about. There are counties out of this state, Virginia, Pennsylvania. These counties have adopted some ordinances and special permitting. And so my encouragement when I go see the commissioners on Thursday is to encourage them to have special permitting for data centers and generator stations. Some of these dB are set at, in some of these counties over in Virginia, are set at daytime and nighttime values. And those values on the A scale, because they can only go on an A scale. Because when you go to court, they're not an L scale. Because the EPA hasn't updated their things for 4 decades. It's a problem. So our county can regulate the sound in a lot of ways. One of the ways that I've seen that's really, I think, effective is that monitoring the sound that leaves the property has to be at a certain dB. So, just like Northwest Energy stated in court that their sound would go 600 feet past the property boundary and drop. Well, I'm 2,300 feet and you're running me out of my house. So, special permitting, generator stations and data centers is a big plus. So I appreciate your time, and I hope somebody got something else.
And our next speaker, Jim Doherty. Jim Doherty is a fourth generation Eastern.
Sorry, Jim, it's me.
Yeah, Jim, we're saving you.
Sorry, Jim. Been about the hour.
Okay, Cari Olson, my fellow commander here, leading the way here. But yeah, exactly, the gadfly.
All right.
Cari Olson is a mom who went to a volleyball game, and from that she learned about data centers. With her years of experience in politics, she started her own C4 organization called Just One Montanan. Here's
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Okay, so whose dumb idea was this? We went up to the session and said, hey, Zolkoffs, we got a great idea. We want some data centers. Who did it? Who did it? You did? Oh, GM Vortec. So this is not our dumb idea, but here we are. Okay, so I'm going to give you the numbers. And when I give you these numbers, if you come up to me and say we need data centers, I'm going to cry. Okay? So let's go on to the next slide. Okay. Let me show you how Montanans didn't know. We had no idea. So these are the minutes. So this is Katie Zolkoff. She is running for re-election. This is the sweetheart deal. This is the less than 1% property tax. What I want you to look at is who showed up. This means they're for it, so they love the sweetheart deals. This means they're against it, okay? Oh, and Hedges. Huh. Wow. We've got Sadie, we've got Cole, we definitely have, let's see over here. We have, oh, Todd O'Hare, the Montana Chamber of Commerce. This is who's behind this. This is who's behind this. Notice what I'm not one Montanan. These were 4 bills that went through this session. Not one Montanan came up and talked about it. Why? Because we didn't know. Why? Because that is political strategy. Next slide, please. There's her darling husband. Let's just say that. So now we've got Senate Bill 212. This is the right to compute. Guess what? The data centers never shut up now. They run. They will take precedence over us. So brownouts, blackouts, welcome to Montana. Again, as you can see, not one Montanan came in. But there's the Frontier Institute. That's his buddies. That's who else? Oh, there's the Chamber of Commerce again. There's Northwestern Energy. This is who's showing up. This is who's putting this on our tables. And this is who's building this. These guys all benefit from this. And then we've got a lot of dark money in the state of Montana. Oh, you go ahead to the next one. Here.
I was gonna say, Zolnikoff is potentially gonna replace Brett Molnar on the Public Service Commission.
That's a maybe.
That's a maybe, and that cannot happen. If you guys want data centers, Zolnikoff being on the Public Service Commission, we have a 3 to 2 right now. We have 2 people on the PSC that are something workable. Daniel Zolnikoff will not be workable. He makes too much off of this. So this is 38 states, right, that have this. This is that sweetheart deal. This is all this stuff. These states are finally realizing how much money they're losing. Virginia lost $1.62 billion. That's because these guys came in and said, well, we'll be nice. We'll give you a little bit of money. Just give us a little bit of tax break. Give us a little bit of incentives. We're your friends. We're your buddies. $1.62 billion. And Texas is finally caught on. The governor's on board. He finally realized that they lost $4.7 billion. So hold on, let's keep going. Here's the task force. This is a joke. This is an absolute joke of a task force. This is our governor, yet again, failing us on every level. Well, let me show you right here. John Cheshire, CEO of Quantica. Give me a break. How dumb are we? Next one, please. Okay, ready? Ready to see how dumb we are? Ready? Look at that number. 5,381. And what's the next number? Let's listen to the next number. That one is in the 500s. 500, Germany, 500. We're the wasteland. Welcome. Welcome to the wasteland of AI. That's what America is. Next one, please. There you go. Isn't that crazy? This is what our government's been doing. They've been dividing us so we don't talk. Look over here. Why we take here? That's what this is. Next one, please. Let's bring it back to the States. Virginia, top. I think that number is 656. Okay, 656. This one is 413. Northwestern Energy told their shareholders about a month and a half ago, they have over 100 data centers coming our way to Montana. I have a 4-year moratorium bill. I have a sponsor. The next session, I just gotta get to the next session. But I need you guys to talk to by the way, I'm speaking on my own. No one else in this panel is speaking on my behalf. I'm speaking from just one Montanan. I need you guys to talk to your state reps and state senators and tell them to support that 4-year moratorium. Because I got environmental groups that laugh at my face when I say I have a 4-year moratorium. Shame on them. Next one, please. Okay, so this is one of the ways. China, we gotta be China. China went through an AI boom and they went through an AI bust. Right now, they've wasted billions of dollars. They built all these data centers because they gotta have them. They built them and now 80% are sitting empty. We're not competing with China. How much? Okay. We're not competing with China. That is just a lie. I don't know how else to say it. It's a lie. Okay, next one. Guess what we're protecting? What do we love the most in Montana? That big sky. That's what we're protecting. The light pollution, the sound pollution, the air pollution, the water pollution. That's what we're protecting. Look at that. Like, really look at that. We've been able to, that was in 25. I'm too scared to pull it this year. I gotta be honest with you, I'm too scared. But that's what we're protecting. Okay, go ahead. This is pay to play. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I don't care how you voted. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. To me, we're all Montanans. To me, this is us, and this is pay to play. These are all the tech bros. These are all the bros that went through and put data centers in your areas and didn't care. And Elon Musk, the one he did in Tennessee, oh, that is heartbreaking. Because they have so much money, they don't care. They'll build it and they'll be like, find me. And that's exactly what he's doing in Tennessee. Exactly what he's doing. We have too much information in this from the other states on how bad this is. Georgia, a data center stole 30 million gallons. And here's the discrepancy. They said, yeah, we stole it. And the water utility said, you did that in 4 months. They said, no, we didn't. That was like 9 to 18 months. Why? Because they don't want to admit that the closed loop system doesn't exist. Does that make sense? South Tahoe, 50,000 residents are now told, sucks to be you, we're putting all of our energy towards the data centers, and now it's up to you guys to go find your own source of energy. Where would we go? Is it at the corner? Are we going to the governor's mansion? I mean, where do we go? Like, honestly, that's a real question. Where would we go? Okay, next one. Okay, look at that. Oh, that'll be so nice driving down Highway 3. Oh, I can't wait. Oh, look at this. That is beautiful. This, your government hates you. And this is a real possibility. We can't get Yellowstone County commissioners to zone. This is a real possibility. This is a real possibility. This ugly thing, that is Talon Energy. That is where John Cheshire comes from. That is nuclear. And yes, people, we can get nuclear in the state of Montana thanks to the 2021 session. Next one, please. Again, more ugly examples of what's coming our way. Do we want this? Here's the thing, we're in the perfect location right now because they haven't built them. We make enough noise, we can shut this down and then ride it out. When the AI bus comes, we go, oh, I think we told you guys about this, right? This is another reason I brought this man here, so you guys had a real life experience. This man right here, Jim Doherty, comes from Oregon. They've had 10 years of this. Every pretty word, every promise that we're getting made now, he's had it. He's learned it. They lived through it, and now they're having to pick up the pieces. So when he comes up, I'm going really fast so I can get him up here, but when he comes up, I want you to listen. We're too smart for this, Montana. Okay, next one, please. Again, government hates you. Look at these houses. This is nicer than my house. Like, look at this. I mean, these are not, this is not the norm, but they don't care where they put it. You're not above it because you have a couple extra zeros in your bank account. I want to make that clear. No one's above this. They don't care if you're a 5th generation farmer or a 3rd generation, rancher. They don't care. Next one. There are no neighbors that we want or need. None. This lady, all she did was take that bucket and she went like this, and here's my water. Here's how I mop my house. Brown water. This will be great for our kids. I can't wait for my daughter to breathe this. That'll be fun. Won't that be fun for us? And then look at this. The water went dry. And when I tell you there is a major city in Texas that is going dry, they're going dry. The next war will be water. Mark my words. Go ahead. We can stop it. $162 billion of the project have been stopped because of this. The government doesn't like when we meet, by the way, just so you know. But yes, $162 billion. These are not something that we need. We're not like, oh, wow, this is great. Let's stop being the wasteland. How about that? Next one, please. Okay, 4-year moratorium. This is what I want to add on the 4-year moratorium. We've got a full-on ban, no data centers impacting aquifers or senior water rights. No NDAs. Holy cow. That is something that we've seen with these data centers. They are dirty on that. They will do NDAs, and then you will know when you're talking to someone on an NDA, by the way. Go ahead. Okay. I want a 4-year moratorium. Just one Montana wants a 4-year moratorium. Who's with me in supporting the 4-year moratorium? We've got to stop it. I need you guys, because I suck at this, I need you guys to go to justonemontanan.org, sign up, help us out. So then next time I have an action, the initiative, the recall of a possible governor. Oh, that never gets a boo, by the way. That never gets a boo. Okay, so let me introduce the man, the myth, the legend that is Jim. So I ran into Jim in Rolling Stones when I first found out about data centers. And for me, like reading those, and then he's 10 years in. So like I said earlier, everything that we're listening now, and we're hearing these pretty words, and we're not gonna do this. We're not gonna raise your electrical bill. We're gonna help you guys. He's heard it, he's lived it, and he's been a fighter this whole way. So please give him the biggest Montana welcome. Oh, that
was and she organized all of this, and so thank you, Cari. Thank you, Cari.
Thank you guys for
coming. Stand up. Jim Doherty. Jim Doherty is a 4th-generation Eastern Oregon rancher and former Morrow County Commissioner. In 2022, he declared Oregon's first ever groundwater emergency after discovering that nearly 90% of homes he personally tested in the lower Umatilla Basin had nitrate levels above federal safety limits. The declaration triggered state intervention and brought national attention to a contamination crisis affecting thousands of rural families. Special interests responded by organizing a successful recall campaign to remove him from office. He is now running for Oregon State Representative to continue the fight for clean water in Eastern Oregon. And we have been hanging out with him a couple days now, and I'm telling you, this man, he's my hero. I mean, he is what got me. That article in Rolling Stones was also what made me jump on board. And I was like, okay, what do I need to do? And you're at it 10 years. I mean, thank you, Jim Doherty.
Probably, and this morning in Lavina, if I got that right, I probably talked for an hour without setting the mic down about what it's really like to have one data center, let alone, I think she misspoke, 20 or more in a region about from here to Lavina, plus a planned exascale data center. And you know how many folks have, farmers and ranchers have now lost their property through eminent domain to feed these things, and it's quite sad. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a different story. In 2016, I thought I wanted to be county commissioner. I was just a rancher. My wife and I have about 700 cows and mostly a gypsy rancher. I've got a little ranch up in the mountains that most of my stuff's on wheels. But I said, this is something I got to do. She's like, why you got to do this? I said, I don't know. It's just, I feel like I want to, go lend my voice to folks. So the last day to file, I drove all the way across the county. It took me about an hour and 15 minutes spare. Ran in, turned the money down, and I got elected. And I was like, dear God, what I do? And so I drove home, and they say in 30 seconds or less, you got to articulate to people why you're there, what you're doing, what your mission is. And I didn't have one, so I just knocked on the door, and I said, I want to be your conduit. I want to be your voice, right? And in early 2017, I wrote down 20 things I wanted to look into, and one of them was whether I knew we had a growing nitrate issue in the Columbia Basin, and the Columbia Basin is lovely, and it's also rather deadly thanks to Missoula, Montana, who sent this water down into the Missoula floods, right, and dumped 600 to 1,000 feet of sandy soil, which is fantastic for growing potatoes and onions and these kind of things, and they developed that desert. And in concert, they developed the Port Industrial Park, right, which processes all these food products. And the byproduct of that is incredibly high nitrate water, right, which they spread outside of town. And Fast forward to 2022, and I hadn't really got busy doing that. I got elected the president of the Association of Oregon Counties, and I kind of didn't look into those things. And in 2022, the Port Industrial Park got fined $2 million for violating their wastewater permit just outside of town 2,164 times in one winter, right? And they said, we've all got to gang together, get together here, and they had a rather clandestine meeting with all the powers that be in the county, right? Certainly the Tillamook cheese folks and the Lamb Western potato, which, you know, the vast majority of fast food potatoes or french fries come out of there, right? Tillamook cheese, you're familiar with that, right? They're down on the Oregon coast. The vast majority of their product comes from Eastern Oregon, from Morrow County, right? This is a county that was, in my tenure there, was the third highest in the average income in the state behind Washington and Multnomah County, which is Portland to you, right? And we're clear out on the east side. And all the folks were pretty proud of that, which they should be. But I reminded them often that we were also third highest in the poverty level. And we led the state by a factor of 10x in trailer houses, you know, circa 1950. And so they had this meeting, and they said, we all got to push back on DEQ, tell them to leave us alone. And I said, has anybody gone outside of the known plumes or looked at any health issues relative to this? They looked at me like I stole their wallet. And the next day I went out, because I missed 5 years of having the opportunity to do this, and I got 6 sample wells, and I went outside of town, and I went a mile each out on the private wells. And the lab called me and said, just email me. They said, we're duty bound. If it's an immediate health hazard to call you. And I said, which sample? And they said, all 6. So I went down to public health, and I picked up a bilingual public health gal because of the demographics out there certainly need one. This is a county that will be Oregon's first minority county. And we went back out and I got 70 samples, and I went from the Gillette County line, basically the Umatilla County line, randomly testing across there, and I turned in 70 samples, and they called me on 68 of them. And the public health gal had the presence of mind to ask 6 nitrate-related questions, right? Whether it was thyroid issues, kidney issues, persistent headaches, abdominal issues, miscarriages, and I figured what the 6th one was. And when I got my data back, I was like, oh dear God. And went right down to public health, and I showed her this, and she says it kind of pales by comparison, she thought, to what she had. And the first 30 homes that we'd gone to, she just asked these folks, right, your name's not going on here, just respond to X. And it was something like 6 people living with 1 kidney, scores of thyroid issues, everybody had abdominal issues and persistent headaches. And 25 of the first 30 homes we went through, 2 had miscarriages, some multiple. And so I got a hold of the state health department. I said, we got an issue. And they came out and they looked at our data and they said, you've got an issue, right? And so I called the meeting of the county, and they said we need to declare an emergency here, right? And I thought 15 minutes in, and the room looked like this, but it was the bad actors. And they were like, dear God, you're not going to do this. And I finally talked to the other commissioner, who was my cousin. The 3rd commissioner wouldn't show up. He'd been a port industrial commissioner for 20 years. He didn't even show up to that meeting. And I finally said, all right, you tell this gal to go back. You tell them we're not going to get, we're not going to help them. We're not going to get between them and the profits. And she said, okay, we declared the first state of emergency, public health and water emergency. And now there's 2,000 homes out there getting 5-gallon jugs of water delivered to them every week, right? And at the same time, the Port Industrial Park is courting Amazon, right? And saying, hey, you need to come in. We've got some tax abatement land. We've got a lot of it down here. And we'll bring you in. Maybe we can work some good tax abatement, some great deals for you, right? And Amazon's in talks with them, most of them in executive session with these elected officials. And they start moving forward. Well, unbeknownst to anybody else, the Port Industrial Park had a small, not-for-profit fiber optic company that they were taking care of, right? And they set up a scheme, and they made themselves the owner of this fiber optic company as they're having these negotiated deals with the Amazon that's coming into town. And it finally came to light, right? And it was about 4 years later, and the Oregon Ethics Commission brought them in and fined them all for using their, elected position to enrich themselves. And the Oregon Attorney General stepped in and said, all right, our turn. But they just got past the statute of limitations by maybe 30, 60 days, right? And so those folks they filed a civil suit against all those prior elected officials who had brought in these, 20 Amazons into our area. And the challenge was when Amazon came to town, they knew what was in the water. They were sourcing the water from the Port Industrial Park, and these wells were 30, 40, 50, 100 parts per million. You can't consume it if it's over 10. They're finding now you can't consume it if it's over 3. And so Rolling Stones, the investigative reporter came to town and he said, hey, do you think they're part of the issue? He was coming in to look at the health impacts and these kind of things. And I said, well, certainly they are in that, they're producing 1 million to 5 million gallons a day into the wastewater stream. And I thought certainly that's the issue. They're overrunning the lagoon system and we're having to apply the water in the winter when there's no crop to take up the nitrates. And so he said, okay, well, he tried to get their water data. Had basically moved heaven and earth. It was an act of Congress for him to finally get the data. When he got the data, he found out it wasn't just volume. What he found was the water they were sourcing, that was 40, 50, 60, 100 parts per million, was going into the data centers and through their coolers and through the processes, was concentrating it. And it was coming out at 8x what it was going in. So there'd be water going in there at 100 parts per million, and they knowingly discharged it above these private wells at 800 parts per million. And we've seen the results in the homes that were averaging about 45 parts per million. If you get a reverse osmosis filter you put in your house, if you have 27 parts per million or less, then it will pull it down to a drinkable level. We were averaging 45. When they came to town and started using that water through their coolers and putting it upgrade into these homes, we've seen the spike in the readings we were getting too, right? And this was no longer 40, 50, 60 parts per million. This was 800 parts per million. And so these are things, I think you gotta be aware of. You gotta be upfront with these folks, that when they came to town, they said, look, we will never take anybody's property. That's just not what we're about. And then they built their data center. And they said, well, we gotta power this data center. And people said, well, you gotta get from point A to point B. How you get there? And they said, well, we're gonna come over your lawn, your house, your farm. That's how we're gonna get there. And I fought like the Dickens as the county commissioner, said, no, you can't do this. And they went to the PUC, and the PUC did the takings, right, and took that property. The exascale data center they're proposing right now, 10 years ago, they started talking about the Boardman to Hemingway line, right, which is this massive power line. And they said, you desperately need this to shore up the grid. Because, Oregon needs the power from Idaho in the summer, and Idaho needs it in the winter. And so they went to all these farmers and ranchers. I had a room full of folks just like this, farmers and ranchers, card-carrying Republicans, I suppose. And they said, God, you gotta help us fight this. They're gonna put these giant towers across my wheat field, across my ranch, and give me a pittance, and it's gonna be there for generations. And, I thought, it's for the public good. It wasn't my stance. I was like, I stand with you. It's like, maybe you have to take one for the team. I don't know. So they finally exhausted all their legal means to stop it. And 6 months, 8 months ago, they started building these giant towers. And now they're most of the way built. And then just recently, Amazon came to town and made an application for their exascale data center. And I thought, dear God, it's 10x what a hyperscale data center is. And I was like, how in the world would you ever power such a thing? And I dug into it a little bit, and the Stop B2H folks reached out to me, and they said, we can tell you how they're going to power it. Idaho Power Pacific Corps has just changed the mission statement of the Boardman to Hemingway line to pull the power out of Idaho and service one customer in the Boardman area, an exascale data center. And over those 310 miles, they took almost 90% of the property from these farmers and ranchers. And it's an incredible bait and switch, corporate bait and switch, to sell these folks on, this is why we're doing this, right? So I'm not going to tell Montanans not to have data centers. Just go into this with your eyes wide open. I could go on for an hour, telling you the stuff we're learning now that we didn't learn before, right? It took us 10 years to get the to get what's coming out of the emissions, right? I think there's a flyer here on the deal. Certainly you can get it from here, but there's hexavalent chromium, there's lead, there's 20 different things that are coming out of there. And that's out of one data center, and they're suggesting in our region where there's now 20, if the power goes out and the grid goes down and they have to fire up all their generators and all these things come out, all these things that are on the screen here come out, they may well have to move the people out of the town or out of the region to let the generators run to keep the data centers alive so that the people can stay alive. There's not really a choice. So I was most of the way through my testing. It was about 6 months in, and I carved out a little piece of ground for my son and daughter-in-law, and they got married a half dozen years ago, and they moved in there, and I was just testing all, just doing my thing. And I finally made it there, and I said, hey, we should test your well. My son said, Dad, the well's fine. It's just drilled. I've got the paperwork right here. He said, non-existent for nitrates. The public health gal asked my daughter-in-law the 6 nitrate-related questions, and she answered yes to 3 of them. She said yes, persistent headaches, persistent abdominal issues, and she'd had a miscarriage. And she turned to my son and she said, they're paying. Let's test it. And we went and tested it, and he came back at 40 parts per million. I think about that. 5 years before, I said, I'm going to dive in, I'm going to look for health issues. I'm going to do these kind of things, right? But I didn't. And I've got to live with the thought that had I might have a damn grandkid. So you got to start these things when you got to start them, right? I had a reporter talking to my wife the other day and said, she's right there by my side, and said, how has it changed your life? I'm clear up here in Montana. I don't want to be in Montana. I mean, I love Montana. Sure as hell not getting compensated to be here, right? But they asked her, how's it changed your life? And she says, we've got a small cabin up in the ranch, up in the timber, right? She's been up there like 20 years. And she said, it's where I go to get away and let the world go by. And she said, in the last 20 years, we've spent every single summer up there with the cows. And she said, I haven't seen my cabin in the last 3 years. And they said, why not? And she said, because I can't in good conscience walk away from the battle that these folks are fighting and go put my life on hold, knowing what they're going through. I didn't need to come to Montana. But I sure as hell wish somebody that came to me 10 years ago and told me to open my eyes and be aware of what's coming.
Great time hanging out with me. Can I add just one thing before I try to make this not about me, but yes. So we have Lance. He's from Fort Peck, and he's going to be talking about the pipeline, the Berkshire Hathaway pipeline, correct? No, Bridger. Oh, excuse me, Bridger pipeline. We're going to have him set up here. So once we break out into groups, he's going to be right here talking about the pipeline. Okay, guys. So that's another thing that we have coming our way. So thanks, everyone. Thank you.